Howdy gamer. Let's talk about the runes for Nami. Coming into Season 10, Nami's kind of a more luxury enchanter support as she just primarily offers damage, and that can be okay. She primarily offers damage but then has a bit of CC, so she functions as like a disengage slash like counter engage along with a lot of damage. So she might function somewhere in the season as hyper carries might become more prevalent the longer the season goes. So maybe she comes into the meta, but even not, even if she doesn't, here's the runes that you want to run on her for Nami to function. In this video, I am going to assume that you have an intermediate understanding of Nami and then a pretty good understanding of the support role. So starting with the keystone, Nami's two dominant keystones are Airy and Guardian, and those are going to be the two that I cover in this video. So starting with Airy, it's going to be the most common page and the page that I would recommend like every new Nami player run. Airy is going to give you more damage on your abilities and then give you more shielding come mid game, because with any enchanter support, usually your goal is to like win the lane through your damage abilities, and then later your damage abilities can also be used as your heal slash shield abilities. So Nami's W can be used for the damage, but then it can also be used for the heal. So pretty similar to champions like Sona. Champions like Lulu, I guess, is a better example where her E is a damage or a shield, right? So with any enchanter support, they're going to be running this to deal more damage early, and then also have the basically like the insurance of still being useful late game by having the extra shielding on their abilities. And with Nami specifically, you can use any ability on your ally, and this will proc because of Nami's passive. Nami's passive being if you hit them with an ability, then they're going to get extra movement speed. So whenever you give them extra movement speed, it procs Airy, giving them an extra shield. So you use your E on your ally, it's going to proc this. Your W, it's going to proc this. Even your bubble or your ult will be procking Airy, so long that it's not on cooldown. So great rune on Nami. It will help you win the laning phase and then transition into the mid game. Second rune is going to be Mana Flow Ban. Nami's mana cost are very significant. So you need all the extra mana you can get, and buying flat mana on enchanter supports isn't really viable. You really only get to get mana regen. So being able to get this flat amount for free is pretty good. What Mana Flow Ban does is every time you land an ability on the enemy, you get an increased amount of maximum mana going up to 250, and then once you reach that amount, you also restore a bit more as well. So about at 11 minutes, you should have this fully stacked up on Nami, and then come mid game, you're just going to have a bigger mana pool. So you'll be able to cast WE multiple times in a team fight, and then just be more useful, because if you just run out of mana on Nami, you're just not a champion. Third rune, your good options are Transcendence and Absolute Focus, but I'm going to recommend Transcendence, being that you already win the laning phase with Nami because of Airy and then potentially Scorch, but then also just the way Nami functions, she's a lane bully in the lane, and you should be picking her into lanes that you're going to win anyways. So with Absolute Focus, while you're above 70% HP, you're going to get more AP. That's nice, but you're going to get enough AP anyways from the new support item, and then through the standard build of, let's say, Athene's into Ardent or Ardent into Athene's. So you're going to have enough AP, but come mid game, it's all about how much cooldown reduction you have, because you transition into basically just spamming E and W on top of your ADC as many times as possible. And the cooldowns on Nami's abilities are pretty significant. So being able to get 10% for free without that much of a trade-off early game is pretty good. And you're just missing out on a little AP. It's not going to make or break the game. If you want to, you can run this though, but like in more inconsistent solo queue games, Absolute Focus is going to give you more value. But if you can survive the early game or thrive in the early game and then come mid game, you're just going to be stronger, like significantly stronger, just from having the 10% CDR for free. And then if you get into a position in which you're full build as well, you're probably going to be stacking Forbidden Idol items that might put you over the CDR cap, in which case you're going to be getting more ability power too. So it's definitely a better scaling rune in like every single way for Nami. Third rune I'd recommend is Scorch. With Nami, Gathering Storm is good, but again, like you should be picking her in lanes in which you're going to win. So with Airy plus Scorch, it gives you two runes that help you win the lane, as your abilities are just going to be dealing more damage. So your one-time W is going to feel way worse for the enemy just every single time. So because Scorch's cooldown is only 10 seconds, and then Aries cooldown is how long it takes Aerie to come back to you, which is probably less than 10 seconds. So every time you're casting the W, just more damage over and over and over again. You actually get a W off on the enemy 3 or 4 times, you probably have lethal on them, like solo, without the AD carry even interacting. So great rune. For the secondary runes, I think Inspiration's your best tree. I think Resolve is kind of a noob bait in a lot of cases. You don't get a lot of value out of Font of Life. It's pretty hard to get value out of Bone Plating or Second Wind, as Nami heals herself anyways. So it's fine to take negative trades on her, because you're going to be like, let's say you trade 100 HP with the enemy and then you use your W. You've traded like 20 HP or so. So having these extra like healing / damage reduction tools for trading in lane, not so necessary. And then Revitalize is fine, but with Nami you have mostly damage and heal abilities, so you don't actually have a lot of heals and shields. Champions that make way better use out of this is like Soraka, Janna, Taric, champions that are just getting tons of heals and shields off, because if you're not getting both off, then you're losing a lot of value out of this rune. Domination's an okay option if you're playing into Enchantress supports. Running something like Taste of Blood Ghost Poro will help you just be at a higher HP value, because with most Enchantress supports, they're going to beat you on their poke ability cooldown. So let's say Janna W is going to beat your W cooldown. So being able to have a little bit more HP just makes the laning phase easier. And then with Ghost Poro, it basically gives you ability power for warding in lane. So you eventually just end up with 30 more ability power from this. So that's pretty good. But those are just not like applicable to every single matchup. I would say a good default for anyone to run would be like Biscuits, Cosmic Insight. Cosmic Insight giving you 5% CDR and then 5 max, 5 Summoner Spell CDR and then 5 item CDR. So generally useful, no matter like what items you end up completing. And then with Biscuits, you're just going to get more mana. With Biscuits, every 2 minutes you get one, and then whenever you use them, it restores 10% of your missing health and mana. So it makes it where in the laning phase, even if you've spammed your W and you're completely out of mana, you can just use one of these and then have 1 or 2 more Ws throughout a laning phase without having to recall. And that can be pretty strong, especially in solo queue where lanes are just really likely to overstay for no particular reason. So it can be looked at like that. Or if you don't end up using them in the laning phase, then you can also sell them and then still get the maximum mana, which again, Nami wants all the extra mana she can get. Free boots isn't a bad option, as you just save 300 gold, and with an Enchantress support, especially with Nami, you don't need the boots. You're not going to be moving out of the lane that often, and when you do, you're going to be behind someone anyways. So having lots of movement speed to move out of the lane isn't important like at all. So being able to save 300 gold there, and then be able to itemize into your 2 item spike and Ardent and Athene's faster is way better. And then into engage matchups, Perfect Timing is also good, as you get a one-time stopwatch to make it so that you can negate an enemy's all-in if they flash on top of you or something. Pretty generally useful rune. And then if you save it in the laning phase, then having it in a team fight later is even better. So pretty good rune, especially if the enemy has a lot of champions that have to dive on top of you, such as Vi, Kayle, etc. So the default runes I'd recommend, I'm kind of wary on free boots, but I guess it's fine. And then Adaptive Force Armor, as having the more AP early just gives you more power on your abilities, and that's primarily how you function. And then the 1 armor makes it so that any damage you're going to be taking from the enemy ADC, which is going to be the target you're going to be trading with, is lessened to a degree. Any damage from towers, minions, dragon, etc. is going to be lessened. If you want to, running armored magic resist is also fine, as the extra defensive value offered from the magic resist that you run, instead of having the extra ability power, usually outweighs the extra ability power. If you're playing into any enchanter matchup, it especially does, because you can take damage from those champions. In engage matchups like, let's say, Leona Nautilus, the magic resist is kind of whatever, as you're going to be playing backline the entire time anyways. So being able to tank more damage from them isn't going to really save you. But defaultly, this is fine. So this is the default rune page I recommend on Nami. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I respond to literally any of them. And yeah, So now let's talk about the Guardian page. This page is way more effective at higher MMR, in my opinion, as this big ass shield is like generally just easier to use. It's more synergistic with like more defensive play, and then it will also actually save your ally from like a lethal, right? Like the Ares shield is nice, but it's pretty small. And the odds of you proccing it 2 or 3 times in a team fight is going to be kind of hard as your abilities shield and deal damage. So you could end up shielding your ally once, but then dealing damage with the Ares to the enemy, and then you have to wait for the Ares to come back to you for you to shield again. Versus just having the humongous shield that is Guardian. So into melee matchups, Guardian's definitely better, as having poke on a lot of the engage supports isn't really that necessary because you're already going to be beating them levels 1 to 4, but then past then they're just beating you in lane, and then your job becomes just exist in the lane, get a lot of levels, and then come mid game you're still useful. And then Guardian also helps your ally survive like missteps. And in solo queue, that's like one of the best things you can offer in ADC is like an error correction tool for their missteps. So what Guardian does is whenever you're within basically like 2 Teemos of your ally and they take damage, then they'll gain a shield. Or if you're using a heal or shield ability on your ally, with Nami too, it will proc the same way Aerie does, because any ability you cast on them will proc it, because any ability you hit on your ally will give them extra movement speed. So any ability you cast on your ally will proc Guardian if they're taking damage. With Guardian, the cooldown on it's pretty significant, as it can be from 1 minute to 40 seconds, so throughout most of the game it's going to be about 1 minute. And then the shield scales off bonus AP, or no, it scales off percentage of your AP and then 12% of your bonus health. So, and then the shield amount is way higher than Aerie. And then it also gives you and your ally affected 20% movement speed. So it's like the perfect tool to negate engages. And then with Nami's abilities, they already help peel anyways. So let's say you're behind an AD carry who gets hooked. You use your bubble on the champion that hooked. So let's say Nautilus Thresh. You use the bubble on them. The bubble should also pass over your ADC, so they get the Guardian proc. And then if they're taking any extra damage, you can use the W. And then if they still haven't got away because they got flash CC'd again or something, you can use the E to give them more movement speed. And then any auto attack they turn with will slow the enemy. So it's a pretty good like. It's just a more meaningful disengage tool versus the offensive capabilities of Aerie. So starting with that as a keystone, it's pretty good. And then in a higher MMR, it's probably just best, as in most matchups, like, yes, you're already winning them with Nami, and then you put the enemy, like, whenever you're playing into melees and higher MMR, you're basically just like saying, I'm going to be as useful as you come mid game, and then late game I'm beating you if you're playing a champion like Nami, because you are going to outscale a melee champion into the late game. But mid game, they're going to be stronger than you if you're running Aerie. But if you run Guardian, you kind of even that out, because you give up your early power to meet them mid game and then be stronger than them late game. So it's a winning move for sure. In the third row, none of these runes are particularly useful. If you have a pushing lane, Demolish is fine, as you can get the turret plating at specific times. But Font of Life is generally more useful. With Font of Life though on Nami, it's kind of hard to proc. Even though you have your E, if you use your E and your AD carrier, like your ally that uses it auto attacks, the slow that they apply isn't going to proc Font of Life, which is kind of weird. So only your Q ult or using your E yourself is going to proc Font of Life. So it's kind of hard to get value out of this rune, but you still can, and the extra healing is nice. So it's not wild on Nami though. And then Shield Bash is a completely useless rune. Having this extra damage and armor and magic resist whenever Guardian procs is completely worthless. It's not even worth like discussing. And the third row, you might as well go with conditioning, as bone plating blocks damage for free, but you only are going to get value out of this if you're misplaying. So if you get hooked yourself, sure, you're going to block more damage, but that's really not the goal here. Having something like conditioning is gonna run the same course of why you would want to run Guardian in the first place, is to meet the enemy melee support in terms of scaling mid game. Because with conditioning at 10 minutes, you're going to get plus 9 armor and magic resist, and then a percentage of armor and magic resist. So it's basically going to leave you with around plus 11 armor and magic resist, and it's not that much, but it is nice for an enchanter support who would otherwise just not have the extra resistances. So if any champion's diving on top of you and you're just simply surviving longer, you're providing a lot of value to your team. So that's nice. And then if you're running this page, you might as well run Revitalize. Heals and shields you cast or receive are 5% stronger and increased by an additional 10% on targets below 40% health. The other options is like having tenacity and slow resist when you cast a summoner spell, or having more maximum HP. Nami having more maximum HP isn't that important versus having bigger heals and then bigger shields, because you might as well have a bigger guardian and then better value out of Font of Life, and then better value out of the W, and then better value out of all the other items that you could build. Redemption, Locket, Athenes, etc. And then with this rune page, you would want to go Sorcery second, and then run Mana Flow Band, and then you have the option of either Transcendence or Gathering Storm. With Nami, with most enchanters, I'd probably go Gathering Storm, but with Nami, definitely Transcendence. Because again, your cooldowns are very, very long, and you're so gated in your usefulness by your cooldowns. So come mid game, it's just so important that you have more W's and more E's to use. Otherwise, you're just basically not a champion. And then Mana Flow Band again, because your mana costs are just really high. In a matchup like this, you might play it slower, and you might not even have Mana Flow Band completed come mid game, but it's not that important. Having Mana Flow Band in Enchanter matchups is more important, as you're going to be trading a lot more. But into melee matchups, it's fine if you don't even complete this like by 20 minutes. If there's like no fights happening, it's fine. Like you're eventually going to complete it throughout the game. But having the extra mana just in general helps. For the rune page, you could run the exact same thing: Adaptive Force, Armor, Magic Resist. If you wanted to, you could run Adaptive Force, Health. You could even run CDR, Adaptive Force Health. But the default I would recommend is this, as it's the highest value and the most likely to just be generally useful. So those are the two rune pages I recommend for Nami. Again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I answer literally any of them. And if this video helped you, leaving a like helps me. And if you're interested in some Season 10 support gameplay, as Season 10 starts, I'll be live on twitch.tv/SawyerNelson. Link in the description. Hope this helps. Bye-bye. See ya. Bye-bye. I love playing Nami. I love pressing W and E. It's my passion.